You are listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with Steve Worsley, the toxic mold expert and your number one source for mold consulting and mitigation in the USA. Let's dive into a brand new episode.
Before we get started on this episode, here's a not-so-short disclaimer. While all attempts have been made to verify the content provided in this podcast, neither the podcaster nor the producers assume any responsibility for errors, omissions, or alternative interpretations of the issues discussed here. All information stated in this podcast is the opinion of Steve Worsley. Steve Worsley is a mold specialist with over 25 years of experience in the construction and mold industry. The Toxic Mold Podcast is for information sharing purposes only. The views expressed are those of the podcaster and his alone. These views should not be taken as expert instruction or commands. While there may be references to medical conditions and symptoms, all podcast episodes are the opinion of Steve Worsley, and any medical questions or concerns shall be addressed with the appropriate licensed medical professional or professionals. As the podcaster refers to different mold types, please be aware that Steve Worsley is not a microbiologist, and questions concerning mold specifics should be answered by the appropriate professional. Steve isn't, nor does he offer any legal advice. For any legal advice, you must speak to a lawyer. The listener is 100% responsible for his or her own actions. You can check out Steve's books on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and search for author Steve Worsley. You can also take Steve's mold education courses, such as Mold 101 and the Mycotoxin Prevention Kit, by going to cnccontractorservices.com. Again, check out his mold education courses at cnccontractorservices.com. Now, let's get to the episode.
Hello, you're listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with myself, Steve Worsley, and we have my wife, Cassandra. We're right in the thick of summer, well, kind of, and we're just a couple days away from my 30th birthday.
I was like 30 plus 20, you mean?
Yeah, the big 50 this year.
There we go.
But anyhow, for all you listeners, I hope all of you are doing well. We had a few guests, but it's kind of been right back to just you and I'm trying to find some guests, but as our audience knows, I don't like to do all the post-production. So anyhow.
Yes, well, I mean, there will be more guests, though, coming.
Yes, there will. So anyways, today's topic is something I deal with quite often, and it's mold and rental properties, what tenants need to know about their rights and options. When you hear me talk about tenants, I don't explain every conversation I have, but when you hear me talk about it, what comes to mind?
That it's a tough situation.
It's very difficult.
There's a lot that renters do not control because they are not homeowners.
And in some states, I just had a client just did a discovery call the other day, and they're tenants in California. And I had to tell her, I said, I know there's some states where you literally have to get permission to even let an inspector come in, which is kind of crazy.
It is kind of crazy.
Not to get into politics, but you would think that our government would kind of care about mold.
No, not so much, but we all care about mold. Those of us who know about it and those of us who are impacted by it, and renters are no different.
Right. The first question, that I always want to address with my clients is, we just covered it, but you need to know your rights.
Yes. But the question then becomes, how do they find out about their rights? Do they call the state? Obviously begin with your lease, right?
Well, your lease, I'm not a lawyer, trying to become one though. Your lease cannot supersede state law.
Okay.
So let's just say they're protected under state law, but their lease says that they are not. I'm pretty sure if I put a lawyer hat on, state law would supersede what they signed.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
You're talking, you have to get lawyers involved and go down that road. So it's just a difficult process. But for our listeners, my whole point is know what your rights are.
Absolutely. So do your homework. Exactly.
And one of the most common things I get asked, well, can't we call the health department? I'm like, well, yeah, anybody can call them, but they're not going to do anything.
That's true. So you've really, I think you talk about this in the Mold 101 bundle, putting together your mold support team. Whether
Yes.
you're a homeowner or renter, you need to know what your rights are. You need to know what you're dealing with. But then you've got to put together your support team.
Yeah. And I mean, that includes obviously, an IEP, which we both know that's a huge umbrella, but that could be a consultant, an inspector, mold tester, something else too. I just thought of this. So I'm going to kind of get off of the topic here, but make sure there are several states that regulate our industry. So make sure you know the current laws too of the state you're in.
Absolutely. Like if you're in a Florida or you're in a New York
Or Texas.
Those 3 states have pretty strict mold related industry folks.
Yeah.
Things that you need to be aware of. If you're in other states, you need to check and see if there's anything.
Yeah. And for the most part, it's not regulated. But anyhow, going back to your team, you've got to get a medical professional involved.
Mold literate physician.
Exactly. So it's like you said, building your team is very important.
And it's also very expensive. I think that's something we got to talk about up front. And it's on the renter to pay for those things. I know a lot of people who rent go, wait, but this is not my property. The landlord should be responsible for paying for any and all of this. If there's mold in their place that I'm renting, what do you say to that?
Well, I mean, that's the difficult part is it's up to the renter to foot the bill and you have no idea what that's going to cost.
Correct.
And what I tell my clients is, just expect to pay for everything. Now, if you get a lawyer involved or you have a landlord that actually cares, they likely would probably reimburse you.
But also, don't stop paying your rent.
Well, that's another great topic that gets brought up because, in Wyoming, and I know this because I used to be a landlord, unfortunately, and you cannot withhold the rent because you have a dispute with your landlord.
Correct.
Period.
Correct.
You could go into the court in the eviction process and the judge is going to tell you exactly what I told you. You could show them the worst mold that the judge has ever seen. And they're going to say, per state law, you cannot withhold the rent, which our listeners are probably going to be like, wait, what, Steve? I kind of agree with that. Because at what point does a renter get to say, well, I'm withholding the rent because they haven't painted in 20 years or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, it makes logical sense. The challenge becomes when you're somebody who's renting and you're in a moldy home, you don't have the money to pay for your mold support team to fix the moldy home, but you also don't necessarily have the money to move.
Well, this is where it gets really difficult because that's typically what I hear.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say to my client, like, what's your help worth?
Correct.
And I dealt with this. I don't know if I've told you the story, but I ended up on the news over a tenant situation with mold. And ironically, I told the news station that I didn't want to, and they still did it. But anyhow, this client for this situation, it was one of those apartment buildings where there's probably 20 units in there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the unit adjacent to them also had mold. Well, I told my client, these tenants, I said, you're going to have to explain to the judge and then the news why you stayed there, but you claimed that it was so toxic.
Mm-hmm.
That's a difficult thing to convince people of.
Yes, it is.
I mean, think about that. You're looking at a judge and you're saying, hey, it's so terrible and it's making me so sick. The judge is probably going to look at you and say, well, why didn't you move?
Very, very true.
And you could have a great story. You can be like, well, we can't afford it. There could be 100 different reasons, but the judge is still going to look at you and probably be like, I'm not saying I don't believe you, but you're going to have a hard time convincing me that it's unsafe, but you still stayed there.
No, I think you're 100% right about that. And also, this is going to sound really harsh because we are in a tough economy and money is tight for a lot of people. But sometimes these sorts of situations come as a financial wake-up call that we got to find a way to put money in the bank.
Right.
So that, like rainy day funds or 6 months worth of expenses. And I know to a lot of people are struggling. They're like, how could I even come up with a month?
Right.
But when mold comes, whether it is to a renter or homeowner, and all of a sudden you're looking at $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, it's a reminder that financially, all of us need to do a better job of getting financially prepared for what could come.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it's
all
easier said than done.
Much easier said than done. But but sometimes these are the wake up calls that where you find yourself in a situation where you don't have the money.
Right.
And you need to do something. Your health is important, but now you're in a situation where this mold is affecting your family.
Exactly. The longer you stay there, the longer it's probably going to take to heal. But so for our listeners that are sitting there wondering, like, okay, Steve, we get it. We can't move out. So what should we do?
Yes.
You have to put your lawyer hat on. So I'm telling our listeners this. Mm-hmm. Put your lawyer hat on and start building a case. Start with pictures, a diary, put it in your notes on your phone, get a moisture meter. You can go buy a moisture meter at your local hardware store for $30.
Yes, do correspondence with your landlord that is documented, time-stamped email, preferably with proof of receipt.
Exactly.
If you're going to do things, do it via email. If you can't do email, do it via text. At least that is documented, but do not do word of mouth in person
or phone
call. Yeah. That's not, you cannot prove that in a court of law.
Exactly. Have it time stamped.
Yes. And if you think you're going to record somebody without their permission, make sure you are in a state where that is actually legal.
Right. I guess I just assumed every state you could do that.
There are certain states
where both parties have to know.
Correct.
That's interesting.
So know what state you're in and know what the laws are.
Yeah. And so for our listeners, one of the most common things, and I deal with this even on the homeowners side of things, you have to be able to prove that what's in your body, so that would include, medical mycotoxin testing, is in the home. Because your landlord or their lawyer or the judge could be like, well, so where do you work? Do your kids go to school? How do we know they're not being exposed there?
Correct.
So that's another thing that our listeners need to understand is have to prove that the, exposure is happening in their rental unit.
Yes, and which also points to the need for testing on a consistent basis.
Exactly.
Medical testing, but also indoor air quality, home testing.
Right.
You have to create a record.
Right. And, for our listeners, and once again, it's easy for me behind a microphone to tell everybody what they should do. But if you start adding up your IEP, your medical professional, the mold inspector, the mold testing, the medical testing, you're thousands of dollars into this. Mm-hmm. So at what point are you going to keep going out the money?
Exactly.
And like I said, it's easy for us to say, but at the end of the day, you do have to say to yourself, how much am I willing to spend?
You do.
And, I probably shouldn't share this, but I'm going to. There's another aspect to this too. There are people out there, and I've dealt with them, that thought they were going to cash in because there was a mold issue in their apartment.
Oh, that's true.
They're like, oh, we can sue for millions. I get it. Like, it's a lot of money and it devastates your health, but be careful if you're thinking you're going to cash in.
Well, and also it never goes that way. Lawyers make lots of money for a reason.
Right.
And so the person who's really going to walk away with lots of money, if there is a settlement for mold, is going to be the lawyers.
Right.
And it will cost a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah. And typically, there are lawyers out there, because I work in this space a little bit, that will do it on like a car accident. Mm-hmm. Where they take it on, you don't have to pay them anything. They take a certain percentage. Well, that percentage is usually a third.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. But going full circle to all of this, what tenants need to know about their rights and options. I think there's a piece that if you're experiencing mold, this is going to be a hard piece, but it's an important piece. And I'm a mindset coach, so I'm always going to go here first.
Right.
Your mindset about this is the most important part.
Yeah.
But when you're in a situation like this and it's tough and it's hard and it's affecting one or more of you cognitively, physically, all the ways,
right,
it can be very easy to feel like this is hopeless. There's no way out. We're suffering. We're never going to be able to recover. Your belief about your power in this situation will determine everything you do next.
Right.
So you need an empowering belief about this.
Right.
Not that the mold is more powerful than you, not that the situation is bigger than you, not that you can't figure it out. Everything is figure outable.
Right.
And you need to take that stance from day one, no matter how hard it is.
Well, and one of the most common questions, that I get from people is like, well, how long is this going to take and how much is it going to cost me? Well, when I tell them, it puts them in a different mindset where they're just freaked out, if that makes sense.
And freaking out doesn't help is my point. So it's really important to stay focused on what you can do in the moment, focused on what needs to be done. The documentation is free.
Right.
The sending emails, the asking questions, the figuring out the laws, all of that can be done for free. You need to do everything in your power and trust that you will figure out the rest.
Yeah. I mean, it's, we could try to go into just like one scenario, and I think we will quickly before we wrap this up. But, something that renters need to understand, and if you're homeowners, the other problem with mold exposure is typically there's only one or two of you in the home that are sick. Mm-hmm. So then you have to fight the battle of convincing your spouse or, if you're a teenager, convincing your parents. But I wanted to just walk through a scenario just because most of the listeners are like, okay, Steve, just kind of explain it. Let's just go through a scenario. You just tell me where the mold is and then I'll walk you through it.
Well, let's say somebody's renting an apartment and there is mold underneath their kitchen sink.
First and foremost, obviously, as I always say, we have to stop the bleeding. You need to, first thing, know your rights. Mm-hmm. Second of all, get your landlord property management company involved. If you choose not to tell them, and let's say it's a sink floor. So it could be there's two supply lines. There's a supply line for your dishwasher, then your drain lines. Well, something is contributing to that. Well, if you choose not to tell your landlord, and I'm sure it's probably in every state, you have an obligation as a tenant to notify the landlord that there's a defect.
Correct.
So for our listeners, make sure you notify your landlord. Then if it's visible mold, because that's another thing too, it's not always visible.
Yeah, sometimes you move into a place where you don't realize that they had covered up mold with paint, or they'd covered up mold with three subfloors.
Yep.
And you just happen to smell something or see something eventually.
Right. And another good thing to do is if you're in a multifamily building, you probably have tenants above you, mm-hmm. tenants below you. Well, go talk to the other tenants and say, hey, how long have you lived here? Has there ever been a leak or whatever? Because then you're gathering information. That's another good thing to do. But going back to if it's visible, the best thing you can do is literally you can do a tape lift.
Okay.
I don't advertise this, but there's ways we can help people out and say, okay, you have visible mold. Let's see what we can do to get it tested. So then you get it tested and you prove that it is mold. So, then once you have it verified that it is mold, then you've got to go back to the landlord and say, okay, hey, we know it's mold. Is there any way you can get a mold remediation company in here? If your landlord's still not going to work with you, and I've had clients ask me this, well, can we pay to have the remediation done? Even if you could, I would not recommend that.
Correct.
Because what if your remediation contractor totally botches it?
Then you're liable for lots of stuff to the landlord.
Exactly.
And for the cost, it would make sense to move.
Right. And once again, I know it's easy to say that, but most remediation projects are at least $10,000 at least.
Correct.
So for our listeners, we kind of gave you a scenario and, that's what I would do. So here's our call to action. If you're a renter, the first thing you need to know if you think you're being exposed to mold is what are your rights?
Correct.
Period.
Yep.
It's simple, right?
And you need to educate yourself. Like CNC Contractor Services has the Mold 101 bundle that you can buy for very little, the mycotoxin prevention kit that you can buy for very little. There's the free mold fact sheet, mold investigation checklist, right. How to hire a mold pro. Like before you start jumping into spending money, you should really get educated on all the things first.
Right.
And from an informed perspective, then make decisions about what you pay for.
Exactly. I mean, you named digital bundles that are not expensive, mm-hmm. are free opt-ins to be on our email list.
Correct.
This podcast.
Yeah. How to hire a mold dog. You have all those things on CNC. Exactly. So I would say educate, know your rights, educate yourself thoroughly, and then make decisions.
Exactly. And keep this in mind. We didn't touch on this. If you're in a multifamily building, you're at the mercy of everybody else's air quality around you.
Yes.
So keep that in mind if you're a listener.
There you go.
All right. Well, we appreciate all of you. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Are you ready to take control of your environment and protect yourself from harmful mycotoxins? If you said yes to that, check out the Mycotoxin Prevention Kit. This easy-to-follow digital program is delivered straight to your inbox, guiding you through simple steps to reduce your exposure to the harmful byproduct of toxic mold, helping you feel safer and healthier at home. The Mycotoxin Prevention Kit gives you loads of education on mycotoxins for a really affordable price. Get started today by visiting cnccontractorservices.com/mycotoxin prevention kit. That's cnccontractorservices.com/mycotoxin prevention kit.